Something happened to you that you decided like, hey, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start taking people on trips and like, you know, I can do this for my job.
Yeah, so I was living in Spain in my kind of mid-20s for about like 5 years. And I moved back and I was living in San Francisco, and I basically kind of at the start of it, I just wanted to go back to Spain all the time. So I was working in a restaurant, had different kind of restaurant contacts, and I would convince groups of friends of mine to go with me. We'd rent this like really rad house in Barcelona and just go back to Spain and see stuff. So the event was kind of taking friends back for that purpose of just getting back to Spain and like doing the stuff I wanted to do, kind of paid me to travel. And we were on a terrace and watching the sun go down and drinking wine, and my friend, again, also drinking wine. And my friend was like, you should do this for a living. And I was like, that's crazy. And I'm like, this is not an actual job. And somehow it kind of clicked in. I was like, I think this could be a job. But taking groups on these foreign.
But you're like a legit travel agent too, though.
I'm also a legit travel agent, yeah.
Okay, so that means you can book flights like Sabra and all that stuff.
Book flights, all that kind of stuff. Travel insurance, book flights, blah, blah, blah. Plus we'll like take this group of like-minded people on these like really sort of insider experiences in these cities. Yeah.
And you've been doing Costa for how, 4 years now?
Almost 5.
Almost 5 years.
Almost 5. In September, this is the passport stamp of the first Barcelona, like official one that we did. It opened. I was actually taking a group of people back from Tulum. I had a group of like 20 people. We were flying back through Mexico City. I was like I have to babysit these people sometimes on these big trips. They're like, what does this mean? And what is hamburguesa? And I'm like, it's pretty much hamburger. Just like look at it, you know what I mean? So I'm like doing this stuff and like kind of doing my thing, and this like older gentleman is kind of laughing. This is in January of 2015. This older guy's kind of laughing at me, and I'm in Spanish. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like a professional babysitter for adults. We start kind of conversating. He's actually one of the big people in Cuban travel. He's this Cuban guy. He lives in Miami and like all over the place now. And he was like, you need to go to Cuba. So that was like the first kind of thing. He's like, Obama basically, I had been doing 2 years prior to that, these like kind of curated Spanish-speaking local experiences in Spain and then in different parts of Mexico. And that was sort of the brand, right? I was doing those 2 places. Accidentally bump into this guy. He's like, hey kid, you should go to Cuba. His wife like, listen to this guy. And Obama had just opened it. It was, like 2 weeks before that. And I was like, huh, Cuba. So I went back 2 months later. I just went back by myself, completely crash and burned. It sucked. It was like everything that the place that I had rented on the internet was sold out, and like I had to go to different places. Everything was full. It was really terrible. And then second to last day, I called our guy who's like now my dude, Jorge, and he picked me up and took me to the spots I wanted to go. And we had like hours and hours in his van together, and I was like, oh, I can do this. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Jorge first. Jorge, right?
Yeah, Jorge.
So let's talk about him, because again, it's that whole thing about meeting people.
Yes.
And so Jorge pretty much changed your life, your profession, everything, right?
Completely.
So you meet him.
Yeah.
Second to last day, but up to that point, you're like, I'm never coming back here. This place is terrible.
This sucks. Like, up is down, down is up. It's completely, nothing functions like we feel like things should properly function here. It's very much like, you make a reservation and then they're like, oh, but you weren't here, so we gave away your reservation. And you're like, well, the reservation's for today. Like, what do you want me to be here when I made it? Like, that doesn't make sense. Things don't make sense there, right? Like, all of it is it's just a weird thing. You need a Cuban in Cuba is like this big thing that I say. We were talking about this earlier. Like, she just went to Cuba last month in July, and if you don't have a Cuban in Cuba, it's just like, I don't know, it's a different game. So I met him, and then I was like, oh, I would totally do this. Because he nails it. He like goes, he's driving me to the tobacco country and stops, and he's like, oh, I just gotta grab this thing for my wife, and goes out and comes back with a smoked ham leg, like at his friend's house on the side of the road. He's like, oh, you gotta try this like smoked ham. And it's the best shit I've ever had in my life. So good. I'm like, I wouldn't have found that. I couldn't even get my train. I couldn't even get like a room. And
wait, how long did you wait for the train?
I think it was 17 hours. I would leave, and then I slept in the train station. That one, and I'm like too old to be sleeping in the train station at this point. Did that in my youth when I was like backpacking, and it's like fun in your 20s. The shit's not fun in your 30s at all. And I'm like doing market research.
Yeah, market research. You're like, I'm never coming back here.
Yeah, my wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just gotta sleep on this, wait for this train.
Meanwhile, she thinks you're partying in Cuba.
Yeah, she thinks it's so fun. And
yeah.
I'm like, no.
All right,
and you can't call. I'm like, I miss you. I can't. There's not that.
So talking about Cuba, how many people here have been to Cuba? All right, cool. So, I mean, I'm sure like a lot of people here.
You guys want to go? Yeah. Is it sold? Are you sold yet?
Well, I'm sure like a lot of people here, like I really want to go.
It's a great place. It is.
So what I was going to ask you is like, is it really worth it?
Yes, like 100%. Because now, this is the thing now that I've met these people that do that very well, like I put together these trips in Spain and in Mexico or whatever, I met the Cubans that do their thing very, very well, and we're plugged in with that, and now it's like this like completely insider, you stop at his friend's house and you split up ham leg in the car kind of Cuban experience, where, you know what I'm saying? We're using this as a metaphor, but actually you get smoked ham leg also with every trip. It turns into like, Jorge, for example, just as one of the drivers, he's done this for 25 years. He was made to go into the Cuban military because that was like necessary back then. He's a very large statured black man, and they were like, you're gonna be like a comandante in like the police, like a police leader. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know what the word would be. I don't know what that is. Like
police leader,
a
commander,
police captain. And he's like, yeah, I don't want to do this. So he like started enough of a ruckus with his boss 30 years ago to make his boss sort of kick him out to get into tourism so that he could be in tourism now for the last like 25 years, driving people around, getting ham legs and like going to cool spots.
And you randomly met him, or is it something?
It was a friend of mine who has done these Cuba things like with the National Symphony and all these kind of stuff, like really super high-end things, and he's like, if everything fails, call this guy. And everything failed, and I called that guy, and then it was just like the best after that. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite place in Cuba?
We go to the Bay of Pigs, actually, which the name sounds really gross, but it's beautiful. It's like, you know, the end of this bay. We have a different friend, Jorge's friend's friend, has a house at the end, and he serves us this like crazy lobster lunch on the beach in the Bay of Pigs, which I think is really cool. Yeah. And there's a discoteca in a cave, like in a straight up like 200 feet under the ground stalagmite cave with like crazy speakers and DJs, which again is like, I would have been way more into it in my 20s, but now in my 30s I'm like, this is pretty rad. I'm gonna have one rum and coke and tap my foot for about 45 minutes and then home. But I'm like, this is just, it's amazing every time. I'm like, I'm too old for this shit, but I'm gonna go again every time. Going again in like 3 weeks and I will be at that.
All right, so you're going in 3 weeks. How often do you go? And so you have trips in October and November.
I have trips in October, I have trips in November.
Sold out,
January.
still space?
There's still space in both of those. So I'm not even gonna say our president. There's this guy called Trump that sucks that made this whole thing. I don't want to give him that title. So he made these new sort of like, he kind of rolled back the thing that Obama was trying to do, which is like open up the borders and make Cuba and travel a lot more easy and things like this, right? So there was like this big flow, this huge influx of like tourism into Cuba, which was really great. Our company luckily has the license that we're still allowed to do this. But what he did is he put sort of an air of fear into the air in general. Like everyone's kind of like, oh, can I go? Can I go? It's like the whole like he's going to build a wall to Mexico. Well, he hasn't physically done that, but people have stopped going to Mexico, or like tourism is way down to Mexico because they're just not sure of it now and blah, blah, blah. So he sort of did the same thing with the Cuba thing a couple months ago. So our fall trips are like 3/4 capacity. Starting in January is sold out, March is almost sold out. Ones that are like in a year are sold out, but now people are, I don't know, they were a little hesitant.
Basically what I'm hearing you say is if you want to go to Cuba, people, do you have that moment, like that travel with meaning moment for you that like is really kind of stuck with you, either at Cuba or anywhere else in all your travels?
Multiple. So one of the things also is I started out by just wanting to go on vacation for free, and the whole thing has sort of shifted with having more of these experiences, especially in Mexico and in Cuba. It's more, the trips are now more impactful. We like are supporting local people. We're like giving them, you know, money directly that their government isn't taxing 90% of, and kind of things like this, where I'm seeing like actual growth and like sort of importance come from it. Two things that happened. One, we in Oaxaca, there's a big group of us. We went to Oaxaca, Mexico for Day of the Dead. The lady of our house was directly related. There were 44 students that were kidnapped during like like in Mexico, bad stuff happens often, and there were 44 students that were kidnapped like right around the time it was like 2014, and she knew parents of these people, and it was like kind of like they were like protests, so she like took us to like watch the demonstrations that were happening against sort of the government, and I was like, man, this is so great, and we were like having mezcal with her that was hers, and and I was like really moved, and I like cried. I was like, I'm so sorry, so sorry this is happening, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, it's okay, honey, like things like this happen, blah, 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 right? So she just like kind of coaxed me through it. then later, it was just like this nice, like motherly sort of moment with this woman I did not know at all. She's just like kind of hugging on me. Then she's like, now we have to go to the discoteca. And I was like, what? And it's like, there's like this Day of the Dead mentality in Mexico in general that like you mourn the people that have passed and then you like party about them passing. So she's like, you did that part, now let's go do this part. So this like 65-year-old lady took us out, like out in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I was like, when does this ever happen at home? Like never ever. I'm not a big crier in general, especially not to strangers. This lady's like hugging me in her bosom, like, ah. And she's like, oh, it's okay, honey, have this mezcal. And now we're going out. And I'm like, so it was one of those things that like very much like kind of shaped, I don't know, just things in general and how I think people should sort of interact with each other and hug and let them cry and then take them out for drinks. Yeah.